Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar, one of our Orchestra webinar series. Now, we're right at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. There's a bunch of people trying to get into the room as well. So why don't we get going? So first of all, thank you so much for joining us today, talking about demystifying the Microsoft 365 platform, helping you hopefully understand a little bit more around Microsoft 365, what it does and how it can help your organization. We know that probably a lot of you are using Microsoft 365, but what we're going to try to go through this webinar is talk a little bit around how to get value, how to unlock some productivity, and also really tackle, I think, one of the main challenges that a lot of organizations have around what to use when in Microsoft 365. There's a lot there. There's a lot of overlap, so we're going to try to help you through that journey. So before I introduce our guest, Matt Fishman, my name is Michael Pisarek. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders here at Orchestra. I come from a long history with Microsoft SharePoint. Been working with it close to, I think, about 12 years now, so quite a long time. I do these webinars a lot. I'm also pretty active on Twitter. If you have any questions, thoughts, feedback before or afterwards, please feel free to get in touch with me at any of those social details on the right hand side. I'm also working for Orchestra. So Orchestra is a new venture that we have started. We launched about 6 months ago, and really we call Orchestra a balanced platform of adoption tools, governance tools, and a provisioning solution. What we really are trying to do with Orchestra is make organizations' lives easier with Teams, Microsoft SharePoint, and Microsoft 365 in general. I'm not going to give you the sales pitch now because that's not what you're here for, but if you do have any questions or you are interested in it, please reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to take you through a bit of a demo and show you everything that we do. Now, I would like to introduce Matt. Matt, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. Sorry, I'm looking at the other screen here, trying to get you on here. Perfect.
Well,
thanks so much for joining us. Yeah, why don't we introduce yourself?
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me. So I am Matt Fishman. I'm Director of Solution Delivery and Managing Partner for Clarinet Solutions. We're a managed services organization based in San Diego, and we do everything in the Microsoft cloud. So I come from a development background. I kind of started in web development, UI design, and I kind of fell into SharePoint maybe in 2005 or so. But I've been working with SharePoint since then, and everything in the Microsoft cloud stack since BPOS, which was the
wow.
Generation. Yeah,
that's early days, huh? Early days.
Business productivity online services. That was before it was called Office 365. So, anyways, yeah. So I work for Clarinet Solutions, and you can reach me. My contact information is here in the slide deck, and I'm gonna basically go through an introduction. So I think we can go to the next slide here. I think you're going to take that one.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the agenda. We'll just we'll go through this quickly. So a little bit about session goals. Like I said, we always like to do that so everyone understands why they're here and what we're going to talk about. Last thing we want to do is, for people to be halfway through and work out this is nothing like that it was promised. We're going to talk a little bit about an overview of Microsoft 365, what it is. Matt's got some really interesting insights as well in terms of how to communicate that. Talk about how to understand your business requirements and leverage M365. I know me and Matt have been talking about this a lot in terms of, really helping customers understand what their requirements are before you start getting started on that journey with Microsoft 365. And then we'll talk a little bit around demystifying M365. So I'm going to talk about this what to use when question. And Matt, I know this is something we talk about a lot, but the what to use when piece of Microsoft 365 is one of the main challenges that we're finding customers facing, and I think you would agree.
Absolutely. Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. So before we rock and roll here, a little bit about Q&A and social. If you've ever been to any of our webinars, please feel free to ask us as many questions as possible. You can use the questions tab down below here. It's super easy. to ask questions. Please use them. Think of us as free consulting. That's the way that I like to pitch it. If you've got any questions about anything, let us know. What we'll do is we'll also answer questions as they come in or at the end of each section. But once again, we want to make this as interactive as possible. If you're using any social tweets, or if you're using LinkedIn, or if you're using TikTok or any other of the fancy tools that the young kids are using these days, please use the hashtag of #Orchestra or #WordMakesSimple. And before anyone asks, yes, you will be given the recording for the webinar post, as we always do. So just quickly before we get started here, some session goals. Really what we want to do is help you understand the various tools in Microsoft 365 and what to use when. We're not going to go through all of them because there's just so much there, but really having a good understanding of what tool sets are available and why this what to use when question is not something that's very simply answered. So we're going to talk about some strategies, some techniques, some examples of really great work that we've found that other organizations have done around framing a what to use when a strategy. We're also going to talk about how to best gather business requirements and map them to M365. Once again, there's no point using a tool if you don't know what you're using it for. Talk a little bit about learning out how to successfully roll M365 out in your organization, and also this whole experience. How can you create a more seamless experience of Microsoft 365 within your organization, as opposed to this being a whole bunch of kind of disparate applications that people run around. But before we begin, we have a poll because we love polls, and polls are always fun. So let us do our first poll. So let me just launch this here. Let's see. So the first question is, where are you in your Microsoft 365 journey? So either you're not using it at all, maybe you're just using it for email only, so maybe just Exchange online. Some of you might be using email, Skype and Teams for just calling and messaging, and then maybe OneDrive. Some of you might just be using email, OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint only, or some of you might be actually using the whole shebang. So everything, emails, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Stream, Planner, Microsoft Lists, and the other 3,700 tools that they seem to be introducing on a fairly regular basis. So we'll just wait a little bit. 40% of people have voted. Surprisingly, there seems to be a couple of people that are not using anything or using email only, which is pretty interesting. Most people are using everything. Some people are just using email, OneDrive, and Skype for Teams. So we'll just wait another 10 seconds if you just want to get your votes in. All right. Thank you everyone for voting. Let us share these results as well. Okay, so 62% of you are using everything. That makes a lot of sense. 23%, Matt, this is pretty interesting. 23% are only using email, OneDrive, and Skype and Teams for calling. So it's almost like you're using it more as like an email and a Skype replacement, I guess, before you start using some of these collaborative capabilities here. 4% aren't using anything, 4% are using email only, and 8% are using it. So really, really interesting in terms of where we're at. And I think everyone, regardless of where you're at, is going to get a little bit of insight here. So now with that done, Matt, why don't I hand it over to you and let's talk a little bit about exactly what Microsoft 365 is.
Yeah, great. Let's just go into the next slide and start looking at what we have with Microsoft 365, and this will be review for some folks, but for those of you that may just be getting started, might be some good information here. So what is it? So this is what Microsoft tells us that Microsoft 365 is. So it's essentially a cloud platform designed to help you do more in your organization with intelligent cloud services. So that could be anything from teamwork using Microsoft Teams, business applications using the Power Platform, BI, business intelligence. They have a whole suite of mobile apps, native mobile apps for iOS and Android that let you work on the go, wherever you are, whatever device you're on. And then there's a whole tool set. We come from a SharePoint background, so harnessing organizational knowledge and organizational information is a big piece of the platform. And all of this comes along with identities and security compliance management on the platform. Now, the picture you see on the right side is what it actually looks like when you're in Office 365. And that can be very overwhelming for users. Not all users will see all of these apps, but there's a lot here. I'd be interested to know how many people know what Kaizala is. That's another poll. What it comes down to is a lot of organizations, when they first adopt Microsoft 365, they expect that collaboration will just happen and it will be effortless and painless, especially IT folks that say, oh, we're going to get on Microsoft 365 and we're going to be able to decommission all of these servers and everything's going to be beautiful. We won't have to do any system updates. It's going to be awesome. But in reality, if we don't give the end users the right tools and training, it can lead to a lack of adoption. And a lot of times we'll find that even with organizations that have adopted Microsoft 365 or launched it, we still have a small set of users that are still using the tools that they're used to, like Dropbox, personal Dropbox for organizations. We see that a lot, or Smartsheets or something, where in reality, we can do and accomplish all these things in the Microsoft 365 platform with the right guidance and the right training for users. Yeah, that's kind of what the reality is we find like a lot of organizations that we start working with are in this kind of state where they're not, especially IT departments and users are not getting what they expected because of that lack of guidance for the end users. And this goes back to Michael's question of the what to use when, which we'll take a deeper dive into in a little bit. Let's go on to the next slide.
So maybe just before we move on from this slide, sure. Matt, what is Kazalia or Kazalia? So that's probably my first question. But
I guess I should answer that.
Just in your experience, like what are the tools that you're finding customers are using a lot of in Microsoft 365? And then maybe what are some of the other tools that might be available here that you're finding aren't getting much usage when you speak to customers?
Yeah. So obviously Teams has become, I mean, the adoption on Teams has become huge in the COVID age with remote work and remote collaboration. Oh, sorry, my dogs are barking. Talking about working from home. In most cases, our clients are using, our organizations that we work with are working with Teams, a lot of SharePoint usage, and really kind of just getting their feet wet in that collaboration mode. So there are a lot of tools that are not being used a lot, like things like interactive video, streaming video with Microsoft Stream. I think that is becoming more and more part of mainstream usage. And of course, the Power Platform. We have this, there's basically this maturity model in the Microsoft stack where we kind of get our feet wet with collaboration tools. And then in the next phase, we look at automating business processes, and that happens with the Power Platform, which would be Power Automate, Power Apps, and Power BI. So that's kind of the next step. And then to answer your question about Kaizala, it's I guess I would call it like Microsoft's version of WhatsApp, maybe. It's for not so much like Teams chat, but really more social chat. I don't have a better way of describing it. Michael, what do you think?
No, listen, mine's even worse than yours. I actually I think it's a weird combination of it's kind of like a WhatsApp clone. It kind of does
Telegram.
It does a little bit of what Teams does, but not all of it. But I mean, Matt brings up a pretty good point. I mean, one of the tools that I see that people don't really use anymore is Sway. Like this was one of these tools that launched a couple of years ago, and then no one's really using it either. But Matt brings up a good point. There's a ton within Microsoft 365. There's always stuff being added. There's a new thing coming out called Project Mocha as well, which is going to be another new way to collaborate. And I think Matt brings up a really good point that there's almost so much there that there's no real kind of cohesion around that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. Real quick, I just want to highlight one thing specifically related to Teams. Microsoft sponsored a Forrester assessment analysis on total economic impact of Microsoft Teams. Everything from, and they looked at a 5,000 employee company, and they looked at everything from startup costs and the benefits over 3 years. The link for that document is right there in the slide. And just a couple things I wanted to highlight here. First is that there's, based on that 3-year estimate with a 5,000 employee company, they're estimating a $30 million savings in time. So that's a big piece of it. And what that really comes down to is 3 basic areas: communication, Teams, and we're just talking about Teams, but it really relates to the entire M365 stack. Reduces the total number of time of minutes, reducing the other applications that may be used that are not in the Microsoft stack. So even reducing the number of overnight trips, average information workers save 4 hours per week. And these are all just stats that are in here based on this reporting. Less time spent switching between applications each day. And even the ability to work with users outside of the organization, guest users, is a huge time saving. So I highly recommend looking at this. If we can go to the next slide real quick and just show a little bit more here. Well, how can that be? How can there actually be a $30 million ROI with adoption of Teams? Well, the value of everything being in one place and users knowing how to use the platform is really how that actually makes sense. Now, there are some things, some prerequisites that are highlighted in the report about what you need to do to get there, and those really revolve around what the initial deployment looks like. As I said in the first slide around what Microsoft 365 is, in reality, if your users are not adequately trained and prepared, these savings or these ROI might not be possible. So some things that we found and in the Forrester report are highlighted. We need to have administrators onboarded properly to set policies and settings for the platform. Things like governance and lifecycle management. We need to have templates and designs of sites and teams. Your IT departments need to have their help desk trained so they know how to field desktop support type issues. And then of course, user training is so important. As much as we can do, and as great and user friendly and wonderful the UI is in Microsoft Teams, user training is still super important. And these costs in the example, I think were around 1.8 million or something like that for this company of this size. So that should give you an idea on what the actual startup costs were, aside from the licensing, to get that $30 million in ROI returned. So I know this was a lot of numbers, and I just wanted to highlight, this. I highly recommend taking a look at the report if your organization is looking at, hey, should we make the move? Should we start a Teams engagement, something like that? And you also have to consider that Skype for Business is going away July 31st. So we our time's running out there regardless. So that's really all I have to mention about the Forrester report.
Awesome. And I know someone just asked if we can paste the link to the report in the chat. Hopefully we can. If not, we'll make sure that we get that link out to you. But as Matt said, it's a pretty powerful piece of research there.
Yeah. Awesome. So real quick, I just want to go through and talk about how your business can actually take advantage of the features in M365 and Teams. So just some tips from the field. You need to have an executive sponsor, a champion that can understand how to leverage Microsoft 365 against whatever business challenges you have. That's a really big piece of it. And that executive sponsor also ensures that the goals or the project goals are aligned with the company's strategy, and also that can provide direction to the project team during the project's life cycle. So analysis is also a big piece. We need to understand how the business works. So depending on the maturity of the organization, some organizations have every single process documented, and there's no kind of tribal knowledge there. Other organizations have some mix, and some have nothing documented. So analysis is really important. You have to understand how the organization works in order to provide benefits and apply the tools to solve those organizational challenges. Once you have that analysis done, that's where the work starts. You need to, once you have that, basically we develop solutions to meet those challenges and provide as much of a guided process for your users. We can train, training's awesome, but we also need to make the process for using these tools guided. And what I mean by that, and I think Michael will talk about a little bit more later, I don't necessarily know that I want to use Teams, or I want to use Planner, or maybe I want to use Kaizala. I just need to be guided and told or guided through what tools I need to do my job. So if I want to say manage a project, then I don't care that I need to use Planner or Teams or SharePoint or whatever it is. I just say I want to manage a project, and the system should do the work for me. So, and we'll definitely talk about that more later on in the session. The other big piece of it is reducing the IT administration overhead with lifecycle management and governance automation. So in a larger organization, if you have folks that are spinning up projects, all the time, we don't want to overload your IT departments with requests for whatever it is. So having an automated process for lifecycle management, while at the same time providing governance, so we don't end up with 5,000 teams or SharePoint sites with one user in them. That's a really important piece as well. And then as we move forward, we always need to assess and adapt solutions as your business changes and as the Microsoft stack evolves. So that's that. Michael.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I totally agree with Matt. I think it's a bit of a misnomer that people think, you just buy Microsoft 365 and all of a sudden magically it works. I think the way that I like to think about it is like a box of Lego or Lego. I don't know what's the American pronunciation. Lego. I don't know. Whatever it is. So remember when you're a kid, you get this box of Lego and you get all the pieces and you throw them on the ground. I think kind of M365 is a little bit like that, right? You have all of these pieces, but without knowing what you're trying to build, you can build the wrong thing. So maybe instead of building a pirate ship out of your Lego, you build, I don't know, some sort of car, which might be useless to you. But then the other thing is it has to be built correctly as well. And I think Matt brings up a good point, that really understanding what those requirements are in terms of you building the right thing and having the governance behind the scenes so you're building it correctly are super, super important. And it's one of the ways, I mean, I know, Matt, you touched upon this, where we see a lot of customers and a lot of clients really get into some real challenges with Microsoft 365. It's not just turn on and away you go and everyone's happy and collaborating and, saving 30 million bucks. There's some challenges around that, and there has to be a little bit of planning. So I totally agree with you. So before we move on, we have some questions. You're gonna like this one. So Matt, this one is definitely for you. What about Delve? Is it used? It doesn't evolve. Thoughts, feedback, comments about Delve?
It's used in terms of providing, your user profile information. But aside from that, I don't see a whole lot of people living in Delve, especially with some of the newer solutions that bring in things like adaptive cards. So if you hover over a user within SharePoint or Teams, you can actually see information that's coming from their Delve profile right there. There are still some benefits in there with the org chart feature and also the AI that's there to show you documents that might be relevant to you. But Microsoft's also bringing some of those AI type technologies into things like SharePoint with, there's a new web part called My Feed that will bring in kind of the similar type information, maybe not just documents, but also news that's relevant to you and those type of things. So I don't see, I know Dove gets a lot of hate. Yeah, I don't see folks living in Delve, but just something if they need to see more information on a particular user or particular colleague that they're working with, that they would use it for that purpose. I don't know, Michael, if that.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I think it was originally envisaged as being this kind of entry point into M365. I think that's been overtaken a little bit by the Office.com homepage. And I don't know what they're going to do with Delve. I mean, there definitely needs to be an area in M365 which is like profile focused, which I think the original idea of Delve was. I'm sure Microsoft is working on something a little bit better. So as Matt said, now that you might have a strategy, you might have this issue. One of the biggest challenges that we see constantly around customers is like determining what to use when. So after you have these business requirements and after you kind of understand what you're trying to do from a business perspective, what are the tools and what are the capabilities in Microsoft 365 that you can leverage to get some real value? And the first question is like, why all the confusion? Surely this should be simpler. Now, the reason that this is such a huge, I think, challenge for end users and organizations alike is that M365 has got lots of different tools. That little screenshot what Matt put, there's definitely more tools there. There's more tools coming up. And the reason, I think one of the challenges with M365, there's so much there, there's almost too much choice, right? So there's almost too many tools. Those tools are going to keep growing. The other challenge that we find is there's a lot of overlap between the various tools. That's one of the big things. There's no real one place for, document management within Microsoft 365, or there's no, let's go and collaborate within Microsoft 365. There's all these various options. But the problem with a lot of our options is there's also a lot of overlap, right? So a simple thing that we'll talk about later on is managing tasks within Microsoft 365. There's literally 6 ways that we're going to go through. I'm sure there's other ways there, but from an end user perspective, if you don't provide them with the guidance on these various tools and how they might want to manage tasks, you might have some people using projects, some people using Planner, some people using Outlook tasks, and some people using all of these other tools. The other thing with Microsoft 365 as well in particular, there's a lot of velocity within the platform. If you're using Microsoft 365 on a daily basis, you'll see that things are changing pretty regularly. Definitely where we're at, more of the technical side from the consultant side, like there's stuff coming out all the time. And some of it we know about, some of it just kind of magically appears and we're trying to deal with that. But once again, it's not a static platform. There's a lot of velocity there. And personally, I think that's a good thing. If you've seen maybe the velocity around all of the improvements to the Teams meeting stuff that's happened since COVID, that gives you an idea of just how quickly Microsoft is working on that. Now, one of the other things I'd like to say is, listen, if you feel silly because you're maybe even an M365 admin or you're an end user in particular, and you don't really understand how it all fits together, don't feel silly, because this is one of the main challenges that we find across the board. Organizations have huge challenges with. What are the tools that are available? What do they do? What's the overlap? And of course, the end thing is like, what should I use when? Now, surely you might be thinking, me and Matt are just making all this up. Surely there must be one convenient diagram that shows you everything within Microsoft 365. Now, this is a really popular community thing. It's called the periodic table of Office 365 or Microsoft 365. Now, Matt, I don't know what you think, but if you have to create a periodic table of anything, there's probably some inherent complexity there. So once again, there's just so much within M365. There's things which are going to be added, as Matt talked about, a lot of the Power App stuff. Luckily, all those names keep changing also. That's another thing that Microsoft really likes to do also, is change names of various features. But like I said, if you want to get a much better understanding of what's within Microsoft 365, if you go to jump to 365.com, Matt Wade actually runs this. It's a really fantastic resource that goes through some of these tools and some of the capabilities what they're used for also. So with all of these pieces and all of these tools, how can you actually make this work for your organization? So how can you simplify this? So one of the first things that we would do when coming up with an organization is you have to come up with a clear strategy, right? As Matt said, you really need training, and communication is going to give you the best chance of success. So after you understand your business requirements, we're trying to manage projects more effectively, or we want to collaborate with external vendors, or we want to reduce our RFP process by 20%. After understanding that, then you can start mapping all of these tools together, support that through training, support that through communication, and really start to get some value out of Microsoft 365. Now, assuming that your users are going to figure this out themselves, this really rarely works. Matt, I might turn it over to you for some comments here, but this idea that an end user is going to be able to go without any training, and M365 is going to be, you know, this Facebook-like experience or this TikTok-like experience where it's super easy and super, super simple to use. I haven't seen that. I just think there's just way too much in Microsoft 365 for users that without training, like I said, this kind of figuring out themselves approach rarely works. What have you seen, Matt, in your experience around that?
Definitely the same thing, and that's something that we do a lot of is that end user training, and I think it's overlooked by a lot of organizations. So that is just so key for success in this process. But yeah, definitely. But I think I mentioned it before. IT departments will put M365 in place and then just expect things to work, but it just doesn't work that way without some help for those end users.
Yeah, and I think that's a byproduct of, maybe IT departments traditionally think that this is like Word or like Excel. You just put it on there and people are going to start using it. It doesn't work like that. I mean, I think M365 is much more like SAP or Salesforce, these really large platforms that they need training around. So in terms of strategies, oh, go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just going to say, and aside from that, the guidance, providing that guidance, not just training, but having that kind of wizard-like experience, if you will. So even with training, users might forget what they're supposed to do when. So not just what to use when, but where to go. So having that, some methodology or a way to guide users through a process is really important as well.
Yeah. So in terms of strategies, what are some of the strategies that you can come up with, like kind of a what to use when, I guess, framework? So there's a few different ways that we've seen it done. Like I said, not every way is going to work for every organization, but there's definitely some options there. So the first one is around kind of use cases or tasks. So you create a strategy around the common tasks or use cases that you have within your organization. So for instance, publishing an organizational wide announcement or collaborating with external vendors. And then what you do from those high level use cases, then you start mapping those tools so users know that if I'm trying to perform this, these are the types of tools that I'm using. It's a bit of a different approach. You're taking it more from the task basis and then supporting those tools. The other way is around feature sets. So you have all of these different features within Microsoft 365. Some organizations choose to do this around feature sets. So this is what we use Teams for, or this is what we use SharePoint for, or this is what we use Yammer for instance, or OneDrive. And then you can get even more granular down individual tools. So for instance, something around task management, maybe you say, for managing tasks, if you're using it in Teams, we're going to use Planner. But if you're doing it for individuals, you maybe are using To Do or Outlook tasks, for instance. Now, luckily, there's a lot of really good information out there. If you're trying to come up with these what to use strategies, don't do it yourself. Either work with someone like Matt who knows what they're doing, or alternatively, there's a lot of good stuff that has actually been released. So this is an example from Kellogg's. I don't know if it's Kellogg's US or Kellogg's Australia. But it's somewhere. So this is what they came up with in terms of their what to use when strategy. And this is what we call more toolset based. So on the left-hand side, they have the various toolsets. So Yammer and SharePoint, and Teams, and OneDrive, and Outlook. They give examples of what those various tools are used for. And then they give really good things of what my audience is, what tone do I need to use, and how quickly I need a response also. So this is one, I think, a really great way. If you're new to Microsoft 365, at least this gives you a little bit of starting point of, I want to collaborate in real time with a smaller group. Oh, I should use Teams for that, right? Or maybe I want to publish a news article. I should use SharePoint for that as well. So I thought this was really, really interesting and really, really great. They also expanded upon this a little bit more. And I think this is also from Kellogg's as well. This is all available, by the way. We're not stealing Kellogg's information. This is all available online. So the other thing as well is, once again, they went down into more of a task-based approach. So they went down both approaches, both at a tool set and more of a task-based approach. So what they did is you have the activities on the left-hand side, and they have the various tools. I think this is really, really neat. Interesting, they're using both Skype and Microsoft Teams. As Matt mentioned, they won't be using Skype for much longer. That's all going to be going to Teams pretty soon. But once again, a really great example. Another good example, a bit more of a higher level, is from Cerner. So this is from John Moore. This is a diagram that he came up with. I thought this was really, really neat. So OneDrive is that kind of individual file management sort of area. So if I'm just doing stuff for myself, I'm using OneDrive. If I'm doing stuff with people I regularly work with or a smaller team of individuals, I use Teams. If I want to share something that people I work around or I have a common interest with, they use Yammer. And then they use SharePoint for information with a larger group. So I think in this case, SharePoint is playing the role of a larger intranet. Yammer is more playing the role of more of a knowledge management type of approach as well, whereas Teams is more smaller groups of users and probably projects or research initiatives or whatever that is. And just the last one to go through here, our friends from To The Lead, they have some really interesting what to use when examples. They have a white paper around this as well. It's in the slides here. If you click on the To The Lead logo, it's my first time using the spotlight thing as well. If you click on the To The Lead logo here, this will take you directly. They actually have a white paper around this, which is pretty useful. So once again, they do it scenario based, and they also talk about it in terms of an audience and a time sensitivity as well. So some really great ways at least to get started. But as Matt said, these are all great, but when you're an end user, this is a little bit cumbersome. If I have to go and I have to do something and I have to pull out a diagram, right? And then I'm looking at the diagram, more often than not, what's going to happen is I'm just going to go back to my old ways of working. And typically that means I'm going to either attach a document to an email, or I'm going to start emailing people, or I'm going to call people. So as Matt alluded to before, is how do we make this process easier? So how do we operationalize some of the strategy? And what's interesting is that there's a lot of capabilities that you can use now to operationalize some of this. So as Matt talked about, this guided experience, right? So instead of just giving people training, giving people communication, but still assuming that they're going to have the time or the nous to actually work this out, how do we make this a little bit easier for them? Now, luckily, there's a ton of different ways that you can do this. So we'll go through some of these now. The first one is around Teams and SharePoint templates. So there's new templating capabilities around Microsoft Teams now, where instead of people starting from scratch and getting a blank team, you can actually use some of those out-of-the-box Teams capabilities. So at least then you can create Teams templates based around specific scenarios, maybe managing an event or organizing a store or running a project, and give people more of that guided experience. So at least they get some channels there, and at least they get some apps there. Now, these are pretty simple from a Teams templating perspective, but once again, it's much better than just using an out-of-the-box blank team. The other thing that Microsoft is introducing, and it was announced in Ignite, is this idea of SharePoint templates. So this idea that you can create a SharePoint site and then you can apply a template over this as well. And some of those templates are going to be from Microsoft, from the Lookbook site, and I'll give you a tour of that in just a moment. And some of them are going to be specific to your organization also. So you've got some capabilities through here as well. In terms of SharePoint and Teams templates, if you need templates, and you have no idea what an intranet site should look like or what a collaboration team looks like or what's that, there's stuff that's available. But some common examples that we see around Teams and SharePoint, there's kind of different types of templates. Either they're intranet based, which is kind of more publishing. So you could have templates for departments or product showcases or client communications. You also have templates around collaboration needs. These are typically more SharePoint team sites or teams-based templates, templates for projects or product development or event management. And of course, you're going to have vertical specific templates. So templates which are specific to maybe the industry that you work in. So if you're a law firm, it could be a client matter site. If you work in engineering, it could be a mine site planning or a site reclamation, retail store, classroom, warehouse deployment, all of that sort of good stuff also. Now, luckily, the good folks at Microsoft are good enough that we have these templates already available. So if you go to lookbook.microsoft.com, Microsoft has already shown a range of templates that are available. Now, most of these are communication site templates. I don't know what you think, Matt. They're pretty good starting points. I wouldn't say that the be all and end all. They look really good. They're very, very image heavy. That's one of the things that a lot of people say, that, you know, we implement these templates and we strip out all of the images and it doesn't look anything like it. Like I said, I think Microsoft's been trying to do a little bit of nice marketing work, but at least it gives you an idea of what, you know, a crisis communication site should look like, or what a news site should look like. And you've also got some for departments, some for teams, some for community, and there's a couple of other solutions there. They're also for schools as well. So this is something that is actually pretty useful if you're running an education institution, some examples of these school pages. So Matt, I don't know what you think about these, but I think at least it's a starting point there where you can, you know, guide users.
Exactly. Yeah, and they can just provide ideas. We actually, for our clients, we've used the crisis communications template a lot with COVID and deployed those out and then customized them to individual client needs, bringing in news from their news sources or updating, you know, those components with the social components with the Twitter feeds that are relevant to them. So again, yeah, you're absolutely correct. They're really starting points and something to spark ideas, essentially.
Yeah.
What I love about them is how easy they are to deploy to your tenant.
Yeah, super easy. You just click on add tenant. There's a bunch of stuff that goes in. You have to log in, all of that sort of stuff. We won't do that now, but super easy and super simple as well. Matt's completely right. So these are available. The other thing that I would also say, this is probably in my mind one of the unsung heroes in terms of guidance. Now, a lot of the times you might want to use apps within Microsoft 365, and there's common apps that you might want to create or use that aren't available. Now, if you want them custom developed, you can do that yourself. Of course, you can work with an organization like Clarinet, but also Microsoft has got a bunch of what they're calling Microsoft Teams application templates, which I really like, and they're all free, so that's even better. So there's a bunch of apps that you can download and add them to Microsoft Teams. Some of these are actually really good. So you know, Asking Away is a really good one. Book a Room is also another one which I think is going to be really useful, particularly as we're seeing a lot of organizations stripping down their office space and maybe going more into a, you know, smaller room. Things like building access, checklists, classroom, drop-in. There's a bunch of this good stuff. I really like this one, the employee ideas one. This is a really good way for ideation, but there's a lot here. So once again, instead of, you know, creating these solutions yourself or letting users create them, give them these apps ready to go for them as well. Next thing that I really like as well, as Matt talked about, training is super useful. So one thing that we would recommend is something called the Microsoft Learning Pathways. So this is a way that you can essentially have training material directly within your SharePoint instance, or it looks like it's directly within your SharePoint instance. What's really nice about this as well is that this is all content that's generated from Microsoft. It's presented really nicely. You don't have to create your own training videos, but you also can, which is super useful. So this can also be almost like a learning portal through here as well. Next one is around in-context help tools. Now, this is an interesting one. Matt, I'll be interested to hear your opinion if you've ever used some of these, but this idea that there's tools available, they are paid, They've got free subscriptions, but there are tools available where essentially it almost adds that context to users, that it's like training, and in real time people can add and ask for help directly within SharePoint or directly within Teams. I think some of these are super neat, particularly because you can add your own content within here. And we've had some success with these as well. What have you found, Matt, with these in context?
Yeah, same. Having basically in the interface, you can overlay help content on specific elements and have that kind of help in video, short little videos built in. It's pretty valuable. So one thing I find with it is there's a lot of value up front, and then it just becomes kind of lost in the background after a period of time. But yeah, feedback has been pretty positive, especially on initial rollouts.
Nice. And then the other thing is around provisioning templating tools. So obviously we feel pretty strongly about this since we've got a product around this, but we really feel that in terms of something like Orchestra can provide that really guided experience for users based around Teams and SharePoint. And we take it a little bit further. So it's not just creating a template, but with Orchestra, you can provide a guided experience both around the templates that they choose, but also the channels or the document templates, which can be really, really useful also. So there's a whole range of capabilities through there. So let's touch upon how does a what to use when strategy work. So how do you go through creating one of these? Now we're going to go through just one simple example around tasks. To help you understand the craziness that is managing tasks within Microsoft 365, and also maybe helping you understand that there's a lot to this, right? And that's why we really recommend that you need a strategy around this, or you work with a partner, or you use a tool or something like that. So task management in Microsoft 365, one of my favorite things, seems pretty easy. Unfortunately, if you're an end user and you want to manage a list of tasks, there's at least 6 ways to do this. And I'm sure Matt could probably think of another 5 ways that we don't have on here, but there's a bunch of different options here, right? So there's Planner, there's Microsoft Lists, which was released, there's Outlook tasks, there's Project, there's a SharePoint task list, the old one, and of course there's Microsoft To Do. Now, even though there's all of these tasks, capabilities, or tasks tools around, one of the good news is that the Microsoft To Do Planner app, I don't even know what it's called now. It's like Tasks by To Do or Tasks by Planner, whatever it's called, that can help you aggregate and roll out one of these tasks. The bad news is it rolls up and aggregates some of them, but not all of them, right? So that's where it can also get a little bit confusing as well. Now, in terms of task management, there's a lot of good stuff here, and I'm really surprised with how many organizations are using something like Asana or Trello to manage tasks when they have Microsoft 365, because there's actually a lot of really good task management capabilities. So let me just give you a little bit of a guide around managing tasks. And if you like the information that we're giving, please get in touch with us, because we've got a lot more around managing documents and all of the other things as well. So some of the recommendations that we provide from a task management perspective: when should you use Planner? So typically we like to see, or we see customers using Planner when they want a real visual way to show tasks, or you work in a Kanban style format. You also want to aggregate those tasks into Do, and you want to be able to share the tasks. Now, I really like Planner. The problem with Planner is it can be a little bit confusing for people to use, and also there's not much extensibility in Planner. So that brings me on to Microsoft Lists. Microsoft Lists is a new capability. One of the out-of-the-box template is, I think it's like a task tracking template, it's called. One of the great things about Microsoft Lists, and one of the things that you might want to consider, is if you want to manage tasks, but you want to add additional metadata or attributes to those tasks, Microsoft List is going to allow you to do that. So that's something that's really, really powerful, and you can't do in Planner. I can't add additional fields that I want users to fill in Planner. I can do that within Microsoft Lists. The other really nice thing about Microsoft Lists as well is now you've got a whole range of options of how you want to customize the display of your tasks also. So you can do that as well. It does require a little bit of custom coding, but there's a whole bunch of flexibility. And the other thing I do like around Microsoft Lists as well is you can now apply rules to tasks. So you can have things like highlighting rules, or just general kind of rules which can make that UI work a little bit easier. Outlook tasks is another one which I know a lot of people use. I personally don't recommend it, but a lot of people still live in Outlook. I would use Outlook if you're just use Outlook, and you typically just create tasks to yourselves which are related to emails. That's one of the things that I commonly do. And now there's 3 more options as well. So the old school SharePoint task list, that's another thing that's available. Use that if you really like classic SharePoint or the old version of SharePoint, or you're using that. Also use that if you really need a Gantt chart. That was one of the big things of that SharePoint task list. Matt, if you remember, people love that kind of Gantt chart thing that appeared there, and you can move things around. That's not available now. And then we come onto Project, yet another way to manage tasks. So use Microsoft Project if you need, I guess, more structured task management capabilities. So things like dependencies, predecessors, all of that sort of stuff, and you need some real structure. There's a new version of Project Online which I really like. It has a bunch more capabilities than just around task management. I really like it because they have a really good Gantt chart there. They have things like dependencies. However, it's also expensive, right? So it's definitely a little bit costly. Personally, I think it can get really costly. I don't know, Matt, if you've seen the costing of some of the project stuff, it gets up there really, really quickly, especially if you want to use the full kind of spread of features. But once again, you can do that. And used to do, once again, in terms of if you want to manage tasks across devices. So I used to do a lot. It allows me to aggregate my planner tasks. It allows me to aggregate tasks from Outlook also in one convenient location. I can use it on my mobile phone. I can create lists. I can do all sorts of good stuff there also. So it makes it really, really useful. So just quickly, just before we move on, and I hand it back to Matt, what to use when around managing documents. We're going to spend 2 minutes around this because this is a whole nother world of hurt and world of conversations, but a couple of things to know about this. Regardless of where you're going to be managing documents, whether you're going to do it through Teams, whether you're going to do it through SharePoint or through OneDrive, in the end, it's all pretty much SharePoint, right? I mean, Matt, you would probably agree with me. It's like the dirty little secret of Teams that all of the document stuff is pretty much powered by SharePoint, which is really interesting when people say they love Teams and managing documents through Teams, but they hate SharePoint. It's kind of all the same thing, but hey, it is what it is. Microsoft is doing some really great work to make sure that their user experience is consistent across whether you're using it through Teams, through SharePoint, through OneDrive, or through a mobile experience also. And there's a lot of good stuff available here. Really, really quickly in terms of those document management experiences, kind of what Kalugs was doing. Now, this is very simple from a what to use when perspective, but we find it can be really useful. OneDrive, used for my stuff, right? So typically OneDrive is used for private working files until you share them. So if you're using OneDrive, instead of saving stuff to your desktop, the idea that you can use OneDrive as a synchronization engine and just use content for your stuff can be really, really useful. Teams and or SharePoint sites should be content for our stuff. So stuff that we're working on with a smaller group of people which require edit permissions also. So once again, if you're working on a document, maybe it starts off in OneDrive, and then after you need to share it with a group of people, maybe then you spin up a team or anything else through there. And then if you're looking at things like publishing content to a large group of people, so maybe you've started working on a policy or a procedure, you've worked on it in OneDrive, now you're ready for it to review, so you move that policy or procedure to, let's say, Teams, and then now when it's published and ready to go, you can move that onto the intranet side. That would be that communication side and process. Now, I know we've gone through this really, really quickly. Hopefully that gives you an example, though, of some of the things you need to do when you have to consider these what to use when pieces. So Matt, let me hand it back to you and talk a little bit around how you could help these good folks in some of the things we've been talking about today.
Sure. Yeah. We can just go. Yeah. So I think I mentioned it before. A little bit more about Clarinet. We were founded in 2010. We're based in San Diego, California. We're a Microsoft partner in collaboration and content, which essentially means that we're experts in the SharePoint area. But our scope goes way beyond that. So we've been working with SharePoint and Microsoft 365. Well, even I mentioned it earlier, since BPOS. We built a lot of intranets, designed. We built many custom ground up designed intranets and even internet in a box solutions. We do a lot of Teams onboarding and training, migrations from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. As we mentioned earlier, that's something our clock is ticking there. We only have a few months left. And we can handle everything from project management. We can provide guidance on internal communications, as well as IT and end user training. We also have experts in Power Platform, which can help organizations automate business processes and increase business intelligence. And then we also provide managed services to kind of augment your internal IT departments and business application teams to provide more value in Microsoft 365. Anything from help desk troubleshooting for end users to admin and training, security, and anything related to the stack. Okay, next slide. Basically, we do have a solution offering around Orchestra, the product that Michael gave you a little bit of information on. And this is going to really answer that question, or maybe fulfill that the solution or the business challenge of providing that guided experience and the governance and lifecycle management for your workspaces. So that is a solution that's powered by Orchestra, and if we can go to the next slide. Oh, okay, yeah. So a little bit of ROI information on Orchestra itself. So I don't know, Michael, maybe you can speak to this one a little bit if you could.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's we've got a couple of ROI slides. Let's just blast through these pretty quickly. So definitely what we've seen is a lot of savings in terms of, like I said, getting people up to speed, using these templates really quickly, and using Orchestra also. We think there's definitely a bunch of kind of value there in terms of accelerating the success of Microsoft Teams also. And then just turning it back to you, Matt, I mean, one of the things as well was every organization's a little bit different, right? And I know that Clarinet will help you decide like where you fit in on this governance spectrum here.
Yeah, so we have clients that want to give their users all the tools that they need with very limited control on that. We have clients that have everything locked down, so we can come in and assess where things fit. A lot of times we'll find that organizations that have limited control end up having some sprawl, and we can take a look and kind of adjust that and maybe archive out and put in some controls around that. If things are too tightly controlled to where users can't do their job effectively or can't get use the solutions that are available, we'll find that sometimes they'll just do things their own way. They'll figure out. So we can help enable your users to take more advantage of the platform. So wherever you are on that spectrum.
Awesome. And Matt, how do I get more? How do I get this wonderful piece of software and work with you folks?
All right. So we are offering a 21-day free trial for Orchestra, and with that, we'll give you a quick onboarding session and show you how the tool works. And that's a fully functioning Orchestra installation for 3 weeks. And we'd love to show you the power of it and provide a better foundation for your organization to really take advantage of the M365 investment that you have. So yeah, that's what we'd like to offer. So I don't know. Yeah.
And feel free to reach out. We've got a comment here from Karen. I'm not going to say Karen's surname, but she says, not a question, just a comment. I've worked with Clarinet for many years and they're wonderful. So there we go. So even Karen agrees with everyone. So just a couple of questions before we go. We got 1 more minute. Perfect. Let me send this question over to you, Matt. So any guidance or suggestions, or is it a good one? Any guidance or suggestions on implementing an organizational-wide team in Teams would be great to hear. Matt, you've got 20 seconds to answer that question, which you usually take about 20 minutes.
So I don't recall. There's still a limit on the number of users for a team, but I don't recall what it is. Do you
Yeah, I
remember?
think it's more. I think it's like 25,000 and then 5
25,000.
organizational wide teams. Yep.
There you go. So it really just becomes an issue when your organization is larger than that. There are also personal apps that you can use. You can pretty easily build personal apps that can be available to surface content from either SharePoint or other sites that would be available, and you can have your users consume that app or use that app within Microsoft Teams. So that can surface things like a line of business app or Power Apps or Power BI or even a SharePoint page. So that's another option to look at in terms of surfacing content into Microsoft Teams for an entire organization.
Great, nice question, nice answer there. Perfect. Well, listen, Matt, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
I hope it's been enjoyable for everyone. We do have events coming up, one on the 11th of February and one on the 16th. As always, thank you everyone for spending some time with us. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Definitely feel free to reach out to Matt. Clarinet, Karen's right, Clarinet are a bunch of awesome people. They do some really, really great work, and they care about the work that they're doing. So you'll be in good hands. But until next time, thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.